If you've studied Chinese history, you must have heard about the Battle of Changping. It was perhaps the bloodiest military campaign ever in China. This is from 260 BC. Two of the strongest states, the state of Qin and the state of Zhao, went to war. The fighting went on for over 3 years. Then the Qin cut the food supply of the Zhao. The starving soldiers started killing and eating their comrades. Eventually, they surrendered and close to 400,000 of them were slaughtered. It's particularly gruesome. But the war tactic is not unique. Cutting off supply lines is an old ploy of war. In the past, it was just food and water. Now it's the internet too. And China is giving Taiwan a taste of war. The latest strike has come on Taiwan's Matsu archipelago. It is home to about 13,000 people. For decades, they've lived in the line of fire, barely 30 miles from the Chinese coast. And now they're cut off from the rest of the world. Their internet connection has been cut off. The undersea internet cables have been snapped. 2 Chinese ships are said to be behind this. The operation took all of 6 days. In today's world, when practically everything runs on the internet, this is an act of war. But Taiwan has not officially blamed China yet, and China is pretending that none of this happened. But according to reports, this is how it played out. The first cable was severed by a Chinese fishing vessel. This happened on the 2nd of February. 6 days later, a Chinese cargo ship snapped the second cable. And since then, life on Matsu has been thrown out of gear. People are not being able to make calls. It takes forever for messages to be sent. Delivery services are not functioning, and it's impossible to make online payments. Thankfully, Matsu has been through this before, and it was prepared for such an attack. Apparently, China punishes them all the time. In the past 5 years, Matsu's internet cables have been damaged 27 times. 27 times in 5 years. In 2021 alone, the cables were damaged 5 times. Last year, they took a hit 4 times. But this latest strike is different and more severe because this time, both the main cables have been cut. Matsu has been pushed into digital oblivion. Authorities have put in place a backup system, but it's hardly doing the trick. It can barely keep the essential services going like hospitals, government offices, and military infrastructure. For the common people, there is no relief. How long will it take to fix it? Can Taipei not help? Well, it can, but it's going to take time. It has to wait for ships that can fix the cables, and these ships are not readily available. This is how it works. You make a booking, and then you have to wait for weeks, even months, to get your cables fixed. That's the problem with submarine cables. And the first ship to fix these broken cables in Taiwan may not come before the 20th of April. So it's going to be a long wait. And when the ship does come, it will charge a huge amount of money. You see, repairing these cables is not as easy as it sounds. Even by conservative estimates, Taiwan would have to spend at least $1 million on just the ships. It's a costly affair, and it's a regular one. Which brings us to the million-dollar question. Was China behind this? As I said, both of Matsu's undersea cables have been cut. So either Matsu is very short on luck, or something fishy has happened. And the fact that both cables were cut by Chinese ships, frankly, puts any debate to rest. China's plan to attack Taiwan does include snapping the internet. There are enough and more reports out there to confirm this. This is what China plans to do if it comes to that. So perhaps the island of Matsu is just a practice ground. Remember, Russia did the same. In the initial weeks of the war, it snapped Ukraine's internet infrastructure. China could do the same to Taiwan. Remember, it says, it will reunify Taiwan with the mainland, and if peaceful means do not deliver, China will not shy away from using military means. Beijing has said it in so many words. Its military incursions into Taiwan's airspace are a regular affair. Taiwan's national security is perpetually at stake. As for Matsu, its people have 2 complaints. 1, it's taking too long to restore the internet, and 2, China is not being held accountable for this. Let me quote from Wen Li. He's the head of Taiwan's ruling party in Matsu. This is what he said. The Chinese boats that damaged the cable should be held accountable and pay compensation for the highly expensive repairs. It's a bold demand. They can forget about compensation, we say. China has been allowed to get away with much worse. 2 snapped cables and network disruption doesn't even count when compared to Beijing's other crimes. And now we shift focus to the United Kingdom. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has taken up a fight, and it's a big one. He plans to stop the boats, fight illegal migration. His government has proposed a law. It is called the Illegal Migration Bill. Why is it being brought now? Remember, Rishi Sunak leads a Conservative government. And in case you did not notice, the Conservatives are not in a very pretty position. In opinion polls, the Labour Party has a 20-point lead. So acting tough on illegal migration could help Rishi Sunak's party narrow the gap. But what his government is proposing is quite radical, also controversial. So what does the new proposed law say? How big is the UK's migrant problem, and why is Rishi Sunak so determined to implement this plan? Our next report has the answers.
My policy is very simple.
Stop the boats. That's the slogan of Rishi Sunak's new law that seeks to end illegal migration into the UK. Details of the law are now public. No illegal migrant will get a chance to claim asylum in the UK. Upon detection, the migrants will be detained on a non-bailable basis. They will then be deported to either their home country or a so-called safe third country, a country like Rwanda. Once deported, the illegal migrants will never be able to return to the UK, nor will they be eligible to seek asylum.
That's why this bill,
Britain's proposed law, will grant the country's Home Secretary powers to deport all illegal migrants. Suella Braverman is the current British Home Secretary. She said if this law is not passed, 100 million illegal migrants could qualify for protection in the UK. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is serious about pushing this bill. He said, if you come to the UK illegally, you cannot claim asylum. You cannot benefit from our modern slavery protections. You cannot make spurious human rights claims. You cannot stay.
People must know that if they come here illegally, it will result in their detention and swift removal. Once this happens, and they know it will happen, they will not come and the boats will stop.
The proposed law has not gone down well with the United Nations Refugee Agency. It said that it was profoundly concerned by the proposals. The agency also claimed that the law would deny people the right to asylum, no matter how genuine and compelling their case may be. Back in London, the Labour Party is calling the plans a Groundhog Day and a con. Rishi Sunak says he's ready to fight to make sure that the proposed law sees the light of day. He's also confident that his government may win any and all legal battles coming its way. The United Kingdom will hold its general election next year. But what explains the timing? It's a race between Sunak's Conservative Party and the Labour Party. Right now, the Conservatives are trailing. Tackling illegal migration could help narrow the gap. It's been on their agenda for quite some time now, and there is data driving their argument. Last year, the number of applications for asylum in the UK hit a 20-year high. 75,000 people applied for asylum. Over 45,000 people arrived on England's shores on small boats. That was 60% higher than the number of people who arrived in 2021. For the Conservatives, small boats now represent a menace which must be put to an end. Rishi Sunak knows the move might reap political dividends, but will it be enough to win the next election? Our next story is about the rise of the side hustle. When it comes to work, we are in a state of flux, and side hustle is perhaps a part of our societal transformation. Think about work from home or hybrid work. The great resignation, quiet hiring, quiet quitting. The COVID pandemic has smashed so many narratives about work life. We used to be personally attached to the 9-to-5 workday. We thought we must be constantly present in the office. It felt like a social contract. They said, find a good job and work hard and you'll get ahead. Well, if that's indeed the case, why do millions of workers feel so vulnerable today? Mass layoffs, housing crisis, looming recession. It seems like we're mired in existential despair. and all while we scramble to adjust to the modern workplace. Well, guess what? Gen Z has been watching on the sidelines, observing all of this, and now as they enter the economy, they're coming with different ideas about work life. They have full-time jobs, but they're also Amazon's reselling, they're thrifting and flipping designer sneakers. They're investing in crypto and selling their own cosmetics. It's not the same as moonlighting, which means truly holding another job with the sole purpose of making money. Side hustle can also be like a passion project with other purposes. So Gen Z, those born between the mid-1990s and the early 2010s, have aced the art of the side hustle, it seems. 59% of them are doing it. And this year, 2/3 of them plan to use social media to make money. The idea is to be financially independent, we are told. Or as the memes say, to be your own boss. People are calling it the new golden age of entrepreneurialism. But this begs the question, does Gen Z want to skip steps here? Do they have unrealistic expectations? Maybe they do. And it may not be such a bad idea. Hear me out. Think about it. They're standing up to the older generation like no one has. They're cultivating environments that serve them. And they're trying to balance financial stability with mental health. So maybe they do know something that we don't. Today, a typical career looks quite different from the way it did years ago. A growing number of new workers think a full-time role is not fulfilling. Employers are more aware and increasingly more open to the concept. Flexible work has enabled staff to pursue other passions. The rise of online platforms has allowed them to monetize hobbies. By 2025, Gen Z will make up 27% of the workforce. So as they age in, side hustle culture is likely to grow in acceptance. Of course, side hustles existed before the pandemic too, but they were often a result of necessity, a means to supplement wages. 3 out of every 5 Canadians are looking to make extra income. In a UK survey, 16% of the respondents said that they take up additional roles. And even before the pandemic, side hustle generated $85 billion in the UK. It was 3.6% of their GDP. With 16 to 24-year-olds leading the charge, layering of jobs will continue, especially in this economy. In a global survey this year, 40% of Gen Z workers are combining at least 2 roles. It's a greater opportunity for them to pursue passion projects, which means they can test interests while also pursuing a dominant career. Sometimes it can add skills that can help in your dominant career. And you don't have to work under the pressure of purely making money. So side hustles also diversify risk. Remember, Gen Z was the first to navigate social media as children, and they grew up witnessing office burnout in adults. And instead of being broken by it, they're finding creative ways around it. They're embracing the work-life balance instead of just paying it lip service. At best, side hustle provides both personal and financial growth. And today's youngest workers want it all. Work-life balance, fair pay, and value alignment, all of it. They're stubborn about it. Maybe it's a good thing. Maybe we should all be taking notes. Now let's shift attention to India's neighborhood. India and Bangladesh are strengthening their defense ties. New Delhi has made an offer to Dhaka, an offer to jointly produce defense equipment. This week, the Indian envoy to Dhaka delivered a speech. In attendance was the Chief of General Staff of the Bangladesh Army, Lieutenant General Ataul Hakim Sarwar Hassan. New Delhi is opening new doors for Dhaka. It is willing to share Indian arms, even enter into joint production agreements. You see, Bangladesh wants to modernize its military, and India wants to help. It has extended a $500 million credit line for defense agreements. And this is part of a larger trend. Under Prime Minister Modi, India has strengthened its ties with Bangladesh, and defense is an emerging focus of this partnership. This is not just about selling arms to Dhaka. A secure Bangladesh is also important for India's own security interests. Indian investments are growing in Bangladesh. Therefore, security of Indian projects is something to consider. Beyond investments, India and Bangladesh share a border. And not just any border, it's the 5th longest land border in the world. the one between India and Bangladesh, the fifth longest in the world. It is over 4,000 kilometers long. In the past, ties have been affected by activities of insurgents, but thanks to the close security relationship, there has been a sharp decline in insurgency. So arming Bangladesh will go a long way in protecting India's borders too. Plus, there are historical factors. I'm talking about the liberation of Bangladesh in 1971. India had a defining role to play there. Indian soldiers fought for the liberation of Bangladesh. India trained the Mukti Bahini, a guerrilla resistance movement. Indian forces trained these freedom fighters. They trained, equipped, and provided logistical support to the Mukti Bahini. During the war, the Indian Army set up training camps. They were set up near the homes of these fighters. The guerrillas were trained for 4 to 6 weeks. And what did they learn? Handling small arms, light automatic weapons, mortars and explosives. The guerrillas got a boost from this training. They took control of large parts of the countryside and they were instrumental in securing Pakistan's surrender. This shared history is the foundation of the military relationship between the two countries today. Last year, India and Bangladesh stepped up their military engagements. Both sides now hold joint military exercises. Bangladeshi military officers have trained in Indian defense schools. There are exchange programs too. But in recent times, China has tried to carve a space for itself. A few years back, China and Bangladesh signed a pact. It was called the Defense Cooperation Agreement. It led to major arms purchases. The Bangladesh Army bought Chinese tanks, its Air Force has Chinese fighter jets, and the Navy has Chinese frigates and missile boats. From 2011 to 2020, Bangladesh paid $3 billion for Chinese equipment. But like most things Chinese arms have been unreliable. Last year, there was a huge row. Bangladesh was unhappy with Chinese tank ammunition. They failed the quality checks, so Dhaka had to reject them. With Indian supplies, Bangladesh could dump Chinese military goods for good. They're clearly the better option. Indian defense supplies are also cost-effective, and there is scope for joint production, which could also create jobs. India's outreach is a good step, we say.